I'm Timothy Stewart. And what does Bishop Michael Lee Graves mean to me? Bishop Graves and I met during a very critical period in my life. During basically one of the most challenging period of my ministerial formation. Around 1978, 79, when I was invited to Temple Baptist Church. First I was invited to Pilgrim where he was, and then I was invited to Temple by Anthony Marcus, another son of the church. Dr. Graves, knowing Dr. Graves and being at Temple at the time, you were basically confronted with a whole culture. Temple at that time was not necessarily just basically a church, religious oriented ministry where you had a popular pastor. But there was an amazing culture that was driven by positive thinking. Okay, Bishop himself was a student of Robert Schuller and other positive thinkers at that time who were doing, let's say, extraordinary and outstanding things. These were not your typical thinkers, personalities. These were persons who were attempting just mind-boggling things, especially in ministry. And so that kind of sustained him, and it also impacted me in such a way that I appreciated and realized at that point that I was a part of something that was unique, something that would not have probably would have been repeated, the way it actually was. And it was something that I think I needed, because I believe that as he was basically sharing at that time, I believe I was a person of destiny at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so he and I would engage in long talks and long discussions. And one of the things I remember him telling me when I'd ask him, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? How come you did that? How come you, etc., etc., etc. And he said to me, you just stay with me. He said, I'm not going to be able to tell you everything. You just stay with me. And you just observe. And that's exactly what I did. It didn't matter whether it was at his house, didn't matter whether it was at church, it didn't matter whether it was on trips that he had to preach. I was basically there, literally. Just observing, taking his bag, whatever, so that he could concentrate, etc., etc. I remember on one occasion he had to go back to Pilgrim. He had to go back to Pilgrim for a funeral. Someone had passed. He had to go back there to preach the funeral. And he was telling me, I remember he was telling what he was preaching. Because normally when he's preaching, he doesn't talk much about, not somebody's preaching. He doesn't, you know. But for some reason, I engaged him and he told me what he was preaching, and that was, he took a text in Judges or something, and the old man came home from work at even. So at even, the old man came in from his, and so I said to him, I know a song that may be good for you to preach with that. Um, so he said, what? So I said, life's evening sun is sinking low. A few more days, and I must go to meet the deeds that I have done, where there'll be no setting sun. And right from the time I mentioned that in the car, until he had me repeat it just a few more times. And